because this is a live this is a live performance. I do some product placement here as well, but I would love to introduce our next speaker, Huib van Bockel. And as I already said, a strong focus on marketing means also a strong focus on a brand. And if you then want to have a presentation around this, who's better to ask than Huib? Huib has a track record in marketing, has been awarded as Marketer of the Year in many different situations, and also seen as a marketing thought leader. He has done a variety of jobs, but in his most recent role as the founder of TENZING, I think that his way of looking at moment of truth is something that is at least really creative, and I would like to give the floor to Huib.
Thank you very much. Okay, cool. Yes, well, it's great being here and seeing all the presentations. Exactly, so the main, I don't want to say moment of truth too much, but the main moment is, of course, how do you define that for yourself? How do you find that moment that is a clear moment where people decide, now I will buy a certain brand? Because that, at the end of the day, is what it is, right? The moment you decide, okay, I'm going to buy a Tesla. You know, that is the key thing. How do you come to that specific moment? And I think before we go into that, I think it's very important to point out why that is now, I would say, more important than ever, right? Because every person listening here today, right, manages a brand, is CEO, has founded a business, whatever. But you have to realize that for every business out there that you have, somebody out there is trying to disrupt your business. Right? It's incredible the pace of disruption that is happening, of course, everywhere. Like something like quick QCOM, like quick delivery, like Gorillas and Getir, we hadn't even heard of, let's say, a year and a half ago, and now you see them everywhere, right? Already, okay, maybe also suffering a bit now lately, but you know, you don't know where this new innovation will be coming from. And I think that's so interesting, right? Whether it's through funding, trends, inspiration, but also the idea, like when, you know, not too long ago, people want to work for McKinsey or Unilever, big companies, now they all want to start their own business, right? There's someone out there right now that really wants to disrupt your business, right? And it could be in any field, right? Like examples like hotels, cars, taxis, you know, and the food and drink industry. And that's also what I'm trying to do, or maybe, dare I say, doing at the moment. So I used to work for Red Bull. I was the head of marketing for Red Bull for Europe and the Netherlands and the UK. And then 6 years ago, I launched my own drink called TENZING. So I wanted to kind of just take you a bit on that journey, what I've learned, because what's interesting for me, and hopefully therefore for you, is that it is extremely difficult, right? There might be a lot of people trying to disrupt your business, but that doesn't mean it's easy, right? So I'm up against, you know, the biggest dogs in the marketing industry, right? The likes of Red Bull, the likes of Coca-Cola, the likes of Monster, Pepsi's now in the space with the Rockstar brand. So these are, you know, businesses that have been around for ages, have huge billions of budget, thousands of people, and we're just a tiny little business. But that is growing really fast. So what have we learned over the years that are potentially helpful for you as well? And you know, we strongly believe that the future of energy drinks is plant-based, low-calorie, and sustainable. So a bit about our journey. So the cool thing, I think, when you start a business, you have to think, of course, like, you know, what's the recipe going to be? What's the name going to be? So all I knew when I started is that I wanted it to be plant-based and low-calorie, you know, significantly cut back on the sugars. And then I was lucky enough to bump into, but then I still needed a whole recipe. And then I was lucky enough to bump into, you know, in the Himalayas, what they drink there, right? When they're amongst others scaling the world's highest mountains. And looking like they were drinking strong teas, actually 2 really strong teas. So a strong tea with salt and a lemon tea. I had a nutritional doctor that helped me with my recipe, and I checked this is actually, you know, a real functionality, and the functionality there is like natural caffeine, vitamin C, and electrolytes. And that then became the foundation of our recipe. And then I also thought, how cool would it be to call our brand TENZING, you know, named after Sherpa Tenzing, the first man on Mount Everest together with Edmund Hillary in 1953. Thought it was a very powerful name, a beautiful story of also someone who, against all odds, reached the top of the world. So, I found a lot of inspiration from that story. And then, of course, I had to, or I wanted to, wasn't even, funny enough, legally needed, but I think, I wanted to really meet the family, get their blessing, and get them along in their journey. And that's me with the Jumling Tenzing, the son of Sherpa Tenzing there, having some tea, on our way to Everest Base Camp. So an amazing story, but I think the cool thing then, if you think about it, all you then have is effectively a name and a recipe. And I still remember that very vividly. I thought it was good, it tasted great, the products worked, the name was good, but then you have to start, right? And then you have to think, how can people out there in this hugely crowded market, how can there be some people out there that say, I'm going to now drink a Tenzing. I'm going to buy this product that I've effectively never, ever heard of. And that is like looking for that moment of truth that we think, okay, when will people make that decision? Now, I think where personally I think it goes wrong is that this is what we currently think, or I believe most marketing people and most startups, most founders think that the moment of truth is. And that is, first of all, in the D2C, right? I speak a lot with my fellow entrepreneurs and a lot with other founders, a lot with businesses. And the D2C is, of course, through the roof at the moment, of course, for good reasons as well. So direct-to-consumer sales, it could be in anything from tech businesses to fast-moving consumer goods. And the whole mumbo-jumbo is obviously heard everywhere, right? What's the lifetime customer value? What's the yield? How much, what's your cost of acquisition? All those metrics that are really closely monitored and that is a clear moment. You think that's when they decide, that's how I keep them in. Really data-led, really money-led. But also very often, I would think, if that's your only strategy, not sustainable. Secondly is, of course, the old school way in promotions. Like if you think about the shop floor, think about the Tesco, the Albert Heijn, where you buy your actual drink or your food or whatever it might be, it's just through the power of promotions, right? Promoting on deal, displays, POS, it was mentioned before. So that is, of course, also a moment when people can actually decide to choose you. But if you start from absolutely nothing, and if you want to create that real brand love, I believe that the moment of truth is done somewhere else. I think it is actually, how do you create a strong emotional connection with your brand? Now, how do you do that? And I think it starts with the right question. I believe in the business world, we ask ourselves the wrong question. And I was actually inspired by that. I actually wrote a book myself called The Social Brand, and it was inspired by this book called The Art of Loving. So it's a philosophy book on love, written by Erich Fromm, an American philosopher. And he actually says, the basic premise of the book, he says, when it comes to love, we ask ourselves the wrong question. We ask ourselves, how can I make other people love me more? How can I make my parents, my children, my colleagues, how can I make them love me more? As opposed to, how can I develop my own ability to love? How can I love you more? And I think that is I thought that was beautiful. And I remember reading it very well. And I thought, not only is that beautiful for love and true, I also believe it to be true for business. If you think about it, every boardroom meeting, every sales meeting, every marketing meeting is basically saying, how can we let people like us more? How can we make people buy us more? How can we get consumers to buy us more? And I think that every CEO will ask their sales director, right, get them to buy us more. Ask their marketing director, get us to love us more, right? Get them to love us more. And I think what would happen if we would turn that around? If we wouldn't say, please buy us more, but what can we do for you? What can we do for the community that is important to our brand and offer them something of true value? How can we love you more? And I think that is a huge paradigm shift, although a slight change of question that can really help build your brand love and make people decide to choose your brand over any of the other brands out there. So, as a good example, it's my own personal example, it's like, how did we do that at Tenzing? How did we link? How did we create that moment? And I think the key element there as well is to have a product and have a clear mission and link that product with the community that's important to you, right? So if you think about our product first, right? So I think it was mentioned before as well, like innovation, your product, how is it different than the market? I think it's obviously very, very undervalued as well, to be honest, in this day and age where people like start with why, but at the end of the day, I don't believe people buy into your why. At the end of the day, they buy into your product. Is it relevant? Is it of this day and age? And for us, it was like, all energy drinks are artificial, high sugar, and basically don't invest a lot of their marketing in sustainability projects, right? More over Formula Ones and CO2 gobbling marketing activities. And we said, we believe the future of energy is plant-based, low-calorie, and sustainable. But that wasn't enough. I don't think that's enough. You then have to go, okay, who are these communities that are important to our brand? And we've been going for 6 years now in the UK, and we really only started with one and added a second after. So the first one was just basically the mountaineering, climbing world, where we have our heritage, that's in our design. But secondly, also bringing it closer to home in London, where we launched the business, is running. And only very recently, only after about 5 years of climbing and running, have we added surfing extremely recently, also just because it's our own passion. So how does that go? What does that look like in real life, right? So product first. So I think, we're very big on our sustainability efforts. Now, if you think about sustainability, it's actually quite a lot of research done. It shows if you get it right, people will love you for it. But if you get it wrong, people will like you less for it, right? So if you're putting your neck on the line, if you're putting yourself out there and you're saying we're a sustainable product, we really believe that you have to have the credentials. We work with the best partners in the business to make sure that we have the credentials and that they tell us that we're doing the right thing. They help us do the right thing. And that also gives this element of trust to people that need to buy our product or are looking into us and trying to dig deeper. Right, so we were the first energy drink in the world to be carbon negative. That means we take more carbon out of the atmosphere than we put in. We're the first energy drink on the world to climate label. So we have a label on every product where we say how much emissions do we emit. We're the first on Amazon to be climate pledge friendly, and we're B Corp certified. So these are all things we're very proud of, and we really have to back it up as well, because I personally believe this is where every business, and this is more of a side note, but I think very important, I would say, like, if you're listening, this is where every business should go to, right? Every business, I believe, in the very, very near future or now, should take responsibility for their carbon footprint. Now, what does taking responsibility mean for us? So we have 4 layers of it. We say, know your carbon footprint. So we know our carbon footprint from our whole business, but also from crop to can, for everything, from all the ingredients we source to the actual production of the can. So it's about knowing it. And I think that's where already most businesses fall short. So know what your exact carbon footprint is. Then show it. Dare to show it. It's a scary thing also for us. On every can, we show our exact carbon footprint. And I believe as well that that is going to be mandatory in the future. I believe it should be as fast as possible, because people should be able to choose a product based on the carbon footprint, just like they're doing now, based on, for instance, calorie intake. Now, about 30 years ago, people didn't know really what a calorie was, a kilojoule was, all those kind of things. But slowly but surely they do, and they make choices based on that. So I think very fast it will become mandatory for businesses to start showing their carbon footprint, and I believe it should be. Then, of course, if you show it, the cool thing about that is you're effectively you're putting it out into the world, so you're forcing yourself to lower it as well. And that's what we do. We have a lot of lowering projects that we do every year, and we lower it as much as we possibly can. And then what we cannot lower, we locally offset. So we have offsetting projects, and we offset more than we emit, making us carbon negative. So I believe this should be the philosophy for every brand and business out there. And for us, it was very important also because it was a clear point of difference versus the other energy drinks on the market. So, and here's the most important thing, because you could argue that, a lot of people, I hope they really care, and I hope they care that we care about our emissions, but I think a lot of people, are still in the phase that I'm not sure they do, right? So I think we want to make people care, but at the same time, you really want to say, okay, what are you doing for the communities that are important to you? So like I said, the first community that we went after is the climbing community. Now, I work very closely with TENZING, the son of Sherpa Tenzing, and I said, like, if we want to do something for the climbing community in Nepal, what is it that we should do? And he said, well, unfortunately, because of the huge amount of tourism, the more and more people climbing Mount Everest, it's actually become quite littered. So we thought of all these different projects, and I thought about these cool projects to do like climbing, like cleaning up missions. And he said, look, at the end of the day, the best thing to do is to build bins. And I remember thinking it wasn't very sexy to go build bins in Mount Everest, but it's what we did. We started building bins. We built the first 3 bins in 2016, and now we've built 11 all the way up to base camp. And we keep them empty, we maintain them, and this is something that we do for our mountaineering community. Then a more important, example closer to home is running. So in the UK, there's about 7 million people that run. So there's a lot of runners out there. And also I'm a keen runner myself. So, and again, if you think about, okay, if this is your community, then instead of asking them to do something for us, we said, what can we do for them? And this idea came about when I was running in London, and I read an article about if you run in London, you might as well not run at certain times and in certain spaces because the pollution is so high, it negates the positive effects of running. And that's, of course, a very depressing thought. And this was an article from King's College. So we went and visited them, and they're sitting on all this data that's not used. That's every square meter is live updated every single minute. And they have all this data, but no one has access to it. So we reached out to Strava, and we created an app that connects their data into our app, into your Strava account. And you can then from now on, if you're in London and you download our app, you can actually see what the live clean air quality is of your runs. So you map it out up front, see where the cleanest air is, and then you go and run there. So that's a clear example of giving something of value. But we didn't leave it there. We created a run club. So every Tuesday we'd go out running with our run club. We'd do protest runs on the dirtiest streets. We'd find the cleanest air to run in, and we'd have a coach there to also make you better at running. So this is all kind of the Clean Air Run Club, all coming back to doing something valuable for our community. And this also then gets a lot of press. So again, if you add real value, people will write about this. It was, of course, super interesting, a super interesting hook to say, okay, where is the air the most polluted in London? What's the best places to go run? This got a lot of press all over the country. And of course, also when people give something of value, people will share that with others, and they'll be proud to be part of that community. And the biggest highlight for us was that in 2020, Men's Health said that 27 apps that will change your life. So these were all like professional app builders, all professional health app builders. And we actually got voted the #1 app that would change your life, which was quite cool for us because we're effectively a drinks business, a plant-based drinks business that built this app on the side. So it really shows that if you have a good idea with very low budgets, you can still create something that is truly valuable. And I think, I get asked that quite a lot, and people go, okay, how do you make your brand authentic? And I think if someone asks you that, if someone asks me that question, basically you're screwed. Because I don't think you can make a brand authentic. You either are authentic or you're not. And the only way to be authentic, in my opinion, is to find a community that you properly care about and give them something of true value. And that's what I believe is the moment of truth. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks, Huib.
No problem.
It was a really interesting story, and also a very story I could personally relate to. I also started 8 years ago, more or less, to become an entrepreneur. Also in a crowded market, some big players. And one of the things that you said is if you have a strong vision, mission, and you believe in it, then it will pay out. And that was really nice to hear. I also like the way you actually, because most of the previous presenters, they talked about innovation and creativity, and I think you clearly showed creativity here. But one of the questions I had, I can imagine all these emotional connections. I can imagine these, that what you do is actually impactful in people's life. But how do you then connect it from that specific moment to the brand. How do you make that final step? How do you make TENZING relevant?
Yeah.
Because do people then, do they notice these bins? Or do they notice what the app actually is doing and who's the brand behind it? How do you make that connection?
Yeah, I get that quite a lot. For instance, our app, it's also, again, if you go, a lot of people say, well, I give quite a lot to my community or to the people, but very often it's, I would say, bribery, because it's like, if you buy this, you will get that, right? It's always conditional love, not unconditional giving. And I'm a strong believer if you create these things. So every time, for instance, how it went viral on Strava, for instance, every time you then run, so there's been nearly a million runs now clocked on Strava with our clean air tracker. And every time you do that, you see TENZING clean air score. So that then is seen by someone else. Yeah. So you would have seen, on average followers on Strava, what would that be, 30? So 30 million people would have already seen the TENZING clean air score. Some people know us, some people don't. They'd find out more. So we really believe in being innovative, and also I think I've actually hardly ever come across a successful business that has not defined a clear community. Because if you have a clear community, you can make that experience really rich. And you could do, and we'd also, for instance, do a lot of running events. So third-party run events. So you just go there, talk about a clean air checker, but also just hand out cans. So we go to the Royal Parks half marathon in London, hand out 50,000 cans. So it would be a combination of really going for this community, doing something for them, but also making sure, for instance, we sample a lot to them. So there's those kind of tactics that we genuinely use. But I think I just heard the Amazon example, for instance, and people, I don't know, most people still remember, but at the end of the day, he started just with books. Right, he knew he was going to create, well, he wanted to create something that it just basically sells everything. Amazon is one of our biggest customers, funny enough. Yeah. But he just started with books. He said for every book lover, because the real book lovers at the moment cannot get that small tail end of books, right? Because they're no longer in production. Through Amazon, you could get those strange little books. Yeah. That was his first vision. And I think that's where, and Strava itself, Strava was a platform that now you can do every activity on. I think for the first 6 years, all they did was cycling. Yeah. And literally to make that experience super rich. And I think that's what a lot of big companies have lost their what was their original community. Yeah. Or when they launch a business, they just try and do everything at the same time.
Yeah, thanks. But you mentioned, no, there's no but. You mentioned that there is that you have to look for a small community. Yeah. And you explained the first community, but the runners community is not a small.
I'm not saying it has to be small. For instance, Amazon's community, you could argue book lovers was, I think, the biggest category at the time, right? Mm-hmm. So now obviously it was like pre-video games. But like running, it was a big community. So it doesn't have to be small, but I think already focusing on one, because I think then you can actually have genuine impacts, right? You can do something that is genuine, right? And I think that's what people will appreciate at the end. And also just taking your time. I think that's also one of there's two big mistakes I think every small business makes. They want to go too quick, mm-hmm. and they don't focus enough. Okay. And I think just taking your time, focus on one community at a time, offer them value.
Yeah. Thank you. There are also a couple of questions from the audience, and that's why I picked up the iPad, but mm-hmm. They're very small letters, so I have to concentrate to really read that. But if you relate what you're actually currently doing to your previous role at Red Bull, when did you come up with this idea? Was it already when you were there and you saw things missing, or was it after that you left Red Bull that this whole idea was coming to life?
After I left, yeah. So I left. And then I thought, for multiple reasons, I wanted to start my own business. Also just because I'm sick and tired of bosses telling me what to do. You can probably relate. So I was like, I really want to start my own business. This is an area I know well. And I think I can add a lot of value here. So that's kind of the reason I started it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thanks a lot. And thanks for your presentation and the insights that you brought from a brand perspective. I think, and that also let us come to the end of our event. We have seen the perspective of academia. We've seen the perspective from the retailer. We have seen the results from a study that we've done, and we heard the ideas from brands. I'm very curious to see the almost finished result of the report. So maybe we can show that. And I think it will be optimized maybe a little bit, but it will definitely be shared with everyone after this event who has participated online. And I don't know how you see this, but I learned a lot today. I was coming here and I thought, how do we find that moment of truth? And what I've learned from the first presentation was that finding the moment of truth actually starts with an audit. Think about as much possible situations where you can actually see where you can make an impact. And I think that also deciding on the relevancy is a very important question. How do you decide which is the most relevant moment of truth? And in the beginning of this presentation, I thought, well, you basically mitigate your risk. You see where it goes the worst, you adjust it, and then you will grow. But actually, at the end of the day, at the end of the presentation, also by the story of Huib, I think the question should be different. The question should be not where you can mitigate the risk, but where can you create the most emotional connection with your brand. Actually, one of the questions today from Ilse was, what is the most relevant question? Well, maybe the most relevant question is, how do you make that personal, emotional connection with the brand? And that is not by saying we should do this or how should we create or maximize the emotion. It's more, what do you actually have? What do you have that makes your brand strong? What is your product? What is your mission and vision? And how can you explain that and make, and that's actually changing the business model. And that's what I really liked about the last presentation. Ask the relevant questions. Not only make that audit, but ask the relevant question. How do you make that personal, emotional connection with a brand? And that's actually a very easy way to define your moment of truth and your key moment of truth that makes you successful. After this presentation and after this event, we will distribute the learnings from this event. There's this fantastic drawing that we will share. In our market research terms, we call that an infographic, but I think it's something completely different. And we will share the report of the findings, of course, also as well. I hope you liked it. I hope you enjoyed the program. I thought it were 4 fantastic presentations, and I thank you all for listening and being at our event.